One of the biggest misunderstandings in genealogy happens when researchers discover words like Indian, Native, or Indian Territory on a historical document and immediately assume they have proven Native American ancestry. Today, we're going to talk about why historical context matters. Words change meaning over time. Governments used inconsistent terminology. Census takers made mistakes, geography changed, political boundaries changed, and many historical terms had meanings that were very different from how we interpret them today. Good genealogy requires us to slow down, analyze the full record set, and understand the historical environment surrounding the document. This is one of the most common mistakes in online genealogy. People see one word on one document and build an entire family identity around it. But genealogy does not work that way. A single census entry is never enough proof by itself. We must ask, who created the record? Why was it created? What did the term mean at that time? Was the information self-reported? Was the census taker guessing? Did the government even use standardized definitions yet? Without context, records can easily be misunderstood. People sometimes treat census records like absolute truth. They absolutely are not. Census records are incredibly valuable historical tools, but they are still human-created documents. Enumerators often guessed race, guessed spelling, misunderstood accents, recorded neighbors incorrectly, and changed classifications between decades. The same person may appear as white in one census, mulatto in another, Indian in another, and black in another. That does not automatically mean the family changed ancestry overnight. It may simply reflect social perception, regional politics, or enumerator inconsistency. Modern researchers often apply today's definitions backward into history. That creates problems. Historically, the word Indian could mean many different things depending on location, decade, legal system, census instructions, and local customs. In some communities, Indian became a vague social label applied to mixed race groups. In other cases, people living in or near tribal areas were casually labeled Indian regardless of tribal citizenship. Sometimes families themselves strategically identified differently for survival, taxation, land rights, or social protection. Context is everything. This is one of the biggest misconceptions online. People find an ancestor in Indian Territory and immediately assume Native ancestry. But Indian Territory was an actual geographic and political region. Many non-Native individuals lived there. The area included white settlers, black freedmen, merchants, government workers, missionaries, railroad employees, intermarried families, and migrants moving westward. Location alone is not proof of ancestry. You must still build a documented genealogical case. This is another huge misunderstanding. Modern readers often interpret Native as meaning Native American. Historically, that was frequently not the case. The word Native often simply meant born locally, born in the country, or not foreign-born. For example, Native of Maine, Native Virginian, Native-born citizen. These phrases had nothing to do with Indigenous ancestry. Again, context matters. The United States government repeatedly changed racial categories throughout history. What counted as Indian in one decade might not be used the same way in another. Certain communities were inconsistently classified depending on state laws, segregation policies, anti-miscegenation laws, local politics, and social appearance. Some families intentionally passed into other racial categories for safety or opportunity. Others were labeled differently by outsiders. This is why one isolated census entry cannot stand alone as proof. Many families genuinely believe their stories. That does not mean anyone is lying. Family stories often evolve over generations. Sometimes identities become romanticized, details become exaggerated, ethnic labels become generalized, misunderstood terms get repeated as fact, oral history is valuable. But genealogy requires records, timelines, DNA evidence, geographic consistency, and historical context. Stories are clues, they are not conclusions. DNA can help genealogy tremendously, but it is also widely misunderstood. People sometimes combine a misunderstood census record plus a tiny ethnicity estimate and suddenly declare proven Native ancestry. But ethnicity estimates are statistical models. Small percentages may reflect ancient shared ancestry. Noise in the algorithm, overlapping populations, and misread segments. And no commercial DNA test can prove tribal citizenship. That requires documented lineage and tribal-specific standards. Genealogy is about building a case from multiple pieces of evidence. Professional researchers look for consistency, timelines, migration patterns, cluster communities, family associations, DNA correlations, and documentary support. One word on one census record should never outweigh the totality of evidence. Historical research requires patience and critical thinking. One of the biggest problems online today is copied misinformation. Family trees spread rapidly across Ancestry, Genealogy, Wikitree, and social media platforms. Once an incorrect assumption is repeated enough times, people begin treating it as fact. But repetition is not evidence. Responsible genealogy means being willing to say, "I don't know yet. The evidence is incomplete. This needs further research." That honesty is part of good scholarship. Historical records are incredibly powerful tools, but they only make sense when viewed within their proper historical context. Words like Indian, Native, colored, mulatto, white, Mexican, all carried meanings that shifted across time and place. Good genealogy is detective work. It requires patience, documentation, critical thinking, context, and humility. The goal is not to force an identity onto the past. The goal is to understand the past as accurately and honestly as possible. Thank you so much for joining me for this discussion on historical terminology and context in genealogy. I hope this presentation encourages researchers to approach records carefully, thoughtfully, and critically. In future presentations, we'll continue exploring Native American genealogy, census interpretation, DNA evidence, chromosome mapping, genealogy myths, historical migration, and responsible research methodology. If you enjoyed this presentation, please like, subscribe, follow, and share.